My company dispatched me on a one-week business trip to another city. When it was over, I drove home in a hurry to celebrate my mother-in-law, Maryanne, Jones's 65th birthday with her. But as I waited at a traffic light, rows of semi-transparent live comments suddenly appeared right before my eyes. Not go home no matter what. If you do, that crime will be pinned on you. The moment you step through the front door, Maryanne will jump off the building. Your fingerprints are all over Maryanne's body. When the time comes, you won't be able to defend yourself. You'll end up with a death sentence. After your husband receives a hefty insurance payout, he and your best friend Kathy Wilberry will live a luxurious and happy life together. I was stunned. My jaw dropped. I rubbed my eyes hard several times, thinking I was hallucinating. The comments stayed right where they were, refusing to vanish. More warnings flooded in. It's over. Jess is almost home. She's walking straight into the trap. Jess, your husband is going to find an excuse to leave you alone with Maryanne, so he can frame you. Whatever you do, don't go inside. At exactly 7:10 p.m., Maryanne will fall to her death. There, setting you up to shoulder the blame. Don't trust your best friend, Kathy Wilberry. She's been sleeping with your husband behind your back. They're plotting to get rid of you. My heart pounded violently. How could Maryanne suddenly fall from a building for no reason? Why would Isaac and Kathy try to frame me? Countless questions flooded my mind. Just then my phone chimed. 3 messages from Isaac appeared. Darling, are you almost home? My boss just called. Emergency at the office. I have to deal with it immediately. Go ahead and cut the cake with Mom without me. I'll be back as soon as I can. I felt the blood drain from my face. If the comments were right, the moment I walked through that door, only Maryanne and I would be left, and all the evidence would point at me. I glanced at the clock. 6:40 p.m. 30 minutes left. My fingers hovered over the chat box, but in the end I didn't reply as the light turned green. I made a decision. As long as I didn't end up alone with Maryanne tonight, I wouldn't fall into their trap. Quickly I reached up and pulled the memory card out of my dash cam, slipping it into my pocket. If I was about to be framed, I wasn't going in empty-handed. I gripped the wheel, took a breath, and slammed my foot on the gas. The engine roared as the car launched forward. I aimed straight for the concrete barrier on the roadside. A deafening crash exploded through the air. The entire car shook violently. The next second, the airbags deployed, cushioning the blow. My head fell back against the seat. A powerful wave of dizziness swept over me. I felt something warm trickling down my forehead. Through my blurred vision, I could vaguely make out people gathering around the car. Some were filming, others were making calls. Several figures in fluorescent yellow uniforms pushed through the crowd and hurried toward the vehicle. Miss, are you okay? Can you hear us? I opened my mouth, but no sound came out. Before long, I was lifted onto a stretcher. Only after confirming I had been loaded into an ambulance did I finally relax enough to close my eyes and slip into unconsciousness. After I arrived at the hospital, the doctors treated the wound on my head. By then, my mind had cleared considerably. I cracked my eyes open and glanced at the clock on the wall. 7:00 p.m. 10 more minutes. I closed my eyes and let the comments fill in the rest of the story. Isaac and Kathy had been having an affair for a long time. He wanted me out of the marriage with nothing, but he never found the right excuse. Then, Maryanne was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. To Isaac, his own mother had become nothing but a drain on his time and money. So he and Kathy cooked up a vicious scheme to get rid of her and pin it on me in the original timeline. Isaac cried his heart out in court, claiming I'd abused Maryanne for years. Even said I told her I wish she was dead. Public outrage exploded. Thousands signed petitions demanding my execution. The prosecution presented surveillance footage showing my car entering the garage at 7 p.m., me taking the elevator to the 10th floor. Neighbors testified they'd heard me cursing and beating her inside. 10 minutes later, Maryanne plummeted from the balcony. With all that evidence, I was sentenced to death. Isaac and Kathy got rid of the burden, collected a massive insurance payout, seized my assets, and walked away free. An ice-cold shiver ran down my spine. The monsters had been right beside me this whole time, and I never even saw them coming. I kept my eyes closed, pretending to be unconscious. Every second felt unbearably long. It wasn't until the clock ticked past 7:10 p.m., that I finally let out a quiet breath of relief and slowly opened my eyes. Just then the hospital room door was gently pushed open. The doctor performed a brief examination. Fortunately, my car's safety features had held up well, aside from some minor external injuries. There was nothing serious. A few days of rest would be enough for a full recovery. After the doctor left, 2 traffic officers entered carrying notebooks and pens. "Miss, how are you feeling now? Would you mind cooperating?" With a brief inquiry about how the accident unfolded, I rubbed my still aching head and replied softly, "Thank you. I'm fine now. Just a little dizzy." After a pause, I put on an expression of someone trying hard to remember. I was stopped at a red light when my phone suddenly went off. I instinctively reached for it, and somehow I accidentally hit the accelerator instead. Before I knew it, the car shot forward. The officers carefully recorded every word. One of them nodded. "We've already investigated the scene. At this point, it appears to have been a single vehicle accident. Fortunately, no other cars or pedestrians were involved. However, you'll likely be responsible for the cost repairing the concrete barrier. Also, the front end of your vehicle suffered significant damage. We've already arranged for it to be towed to the dealership for inspection and repairs." I nodded lightly. A bitter smile crossed my face. "Of course, that's my responsibility. Thank you, officers. Sorry for the trouble. I had taken a financial hit and ended up with scrapes all over my body, but it was worth it." There had been traffic officers, medical staff, and so many onlookers at the crash scene. They had all unknowingly become my alibi witnesses. The officers returned my shattered phone. It was barely functional, but it could still be turned on. After signing the accident report and paying my medical bills, I hurried out of the hospital. As I stepped through the front doors, I checked the time. It was already approaching 7:30 p.m. I flagged down a cab, but when the cab stopped outside my neighborhood and I pushed open the door, my heart instantly sank. Huge crowd had gathered beneath my apartment building. Conversations, whispers, and sigh filled the air. I squeezed through the crowd and immediately spotted Isaac kneeling on the ground. His employee badge still hung around his neck and his laptop bag lay beside him. He looked as though he had just rushed back from work. His hair was a mess, his face streaked with tears and snot. He held the blood-soaked body in his arms and sobbed as if the world was collapsing around him. "Mom, wake up. Please wake up. How could you leave me like this? I'm sorry. This is all my fault. Never should have left if I hadn't. That __ never would have pushed you off the building." The moment I saw Maryanne's familiar face, an icy chill swept through my entire body. I stumbled back. My mind went blank with a deafening roar. I hadn't come home. I hadn't followed the original course of events. So why had Maryanne still ended up falling to her death? In that split second of hesitation, a sharp voice suddenly rang out. "Jessie Stone." It was her. Every gaze in the crowd snapped toward me at once. Before I could even open my mouth to explain, the crowd surged forward like a tidal wave, engulfing me in an instant. "You monster. You killed your mother-in-law on her birthday. How heartless can you be? She's so old and she even has Alzheimer's. How could you do something like that? I heard you've been treating her like a burden for a long time. You're pure evil. Someone arrest her. Don't let her get away." Curses and accusations rained down on me without pause. Some even reached out and shoved me. Then Isaac suddenly lifted his head. His eyes were bloodshot as he locked onto me with a terrifying glare. He rushed over and grabbed my arm, squeezing so hard that I felt like my bones might shatter. "I knew you hated my mom. I knew you resented her for being a burden. But today was her birthday. She treated you like her own daughter. How could you be so cruel? I was gone for just a few minutes, and you pushed her off a balcony that high. Don't you have any conscience at all?" I wrenched my arm free and shouted at the crowd. "I didn't push my mother-in-law. I wasn't even at home. Isaac is framing me." "Framing you?" Isaac let out a cold, incredulous laugh. "You're still going to deny it?" The neighbors heard the whole thing. Around 7:00 p.m., you came home and started verbally abusing and beating my mom. Many people downstairs saw it too. The neighbors immediately chimed in. I stood, frozen, trembling. I hadn't even been at home. Why were they all insisting they had seen me? Police officers pushed through the crowd Isaac rushed forward. Immediately. Officer, it's this woman. She murdered my mother. Arrest her. The officers calmed him down. Confirmed Maryanne's death. Then turned to me. I forced back my tears and stayed calm. I didn't kill anyone. I wasn't even at home. Before I could finish, a neighbor named Emma Bailey cut in. Hands on her hips, she declared firmly. Officer, don't listen to her nonsense. I live directly across from her. I heard everything clearly. She was yelling and hitting her mother-in-law, calling her all kinds of names like old hag and worse. That poor lady was crying and begging her to stop. It was heartbreaking. Another middle-aged woman quickly stepped forward and nodded repeatedly. Officer, I can testify too. I was downstairs dancing when the music suddenly stopped, and I heard a loud crash. I looked up immediately and clearly saw a figure on the balcony. It was her. She was wearing a beige coat. I recognize it. She wears it all the time. I'm absolutely sure it was her. Isaac's emotions boiled over. He jabbed a finger at me. You heard that, officers? She's lying. Arrest her now. The people around joined in, echoing his words. The shout swelled like a tsunami, crashing over everything. An officer took out a pair of handcuffs and said sternly, Miss, you need to come with us and cooperate with the investigation. Just as the cold metal handcuffs were about to touch my wrists, I suddenly broke free from the officer's grip, let out a cold laugh and quickly pulled something out of my pocket, holding it high above my head. You're saying I pushed my mother-in-law off the balcony at around 7 p.m. Fine. Then take a look at this. The moment the words fell, everyone was stunned. The officer took the item and examined it. Isaac hurried over to look as well. The next second, his expression stiffened. He stared at me, unable to believe what he was seeing. The paper was damp, its edges slightly curled from the water that had pooled on my wool coat during the walk from the hospital. The police officer, a seasoned sergeant with graying hair named Miller, took the document from my fingers. His eyes ran over the bold, blue ink stamps of the Municipal General Hospital. Beside him, Isaac's breathing hit a sudden, ragged snag. The dramatic, snot-streaked grief on his face didn't fade. It froze, his jaw remaining slightly open as he craned his neck to read the paper in the sergeant's hand. What is that? Isaac stammered, his hand dropping from my sleeve as if my skin had suddenly turned to hot iron. Officer, she's trying to show you some fake medical excuse. She must have had someone else do it, or she's using some old. Quiet, Sergeant Miller said. He adjusted his glasses, his face completely expressionless under the harsh white light of the ambulance headlights. He read the line item out loud. Patient, Jess Stone. Admission time, 6:52 p.m. Discharge time, 7:24 p.m. Reason for admission, minor head trauma secondary to single vehicle collision at Highway 4 intersection. The sergeant turned to his partner, a younger officer who had been taking notes in a leather book. Check the regional dispatch logs. Did we have an active unit at the Highway 4 intersection at 6:40? Yes, Sarge, the younger officer replied, not even needing to check his terminal. Officer Higgins was on the scene. A black sedan had totaled a concrete barrier. He escorted the ambulance to Municipal General. I have his signed incident report on the system right now. The silence that followed was absolute. It was the specific, terrifying silence of a trap that had snapped shut on the wrong prey. Isaac's face went from pale to a sallow, sickly gray. His eyes darted from the stamped paper to my face, then to the crowd of neighbors who were still standing in a tight, silent semicircle around us. No, Isaac whispered, his hands trembling as he backed away. No, this is a mistake. Emma said she heard her. Emma, you said you heard her beating my mom at 7. Emma Bailey, the neighbor from across the hall, was still standing with her hands on her hips, but her self-righteous posture had gone rigid. She looked at Sergeant Miller, then at me, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. I heard a woman's voice. Emma stammered, her fingers clutching her collar. I heard someone screaming old hag and nuisance. I just assumed it was Jess. They always argue about the groceries. And you? I took a step toward the middle-aged woman who had testified she saw my beige coat on the balcony. You saw me on the balcony at 7:10? While I was literally undergoing a pupillary reflex test under the supervision of 2 doctors and a traffic officer? The woman took a step back, her face turning red with embarrassment. I saw the beige coat. She wears it all the time. The lights were dim. I just thought. You thought what Isaac wanted you to think. I said, my voice quiet, carrying the cold, sharp clarity of a scalpel. I turned back to Sergeant Miller. Officer, my mother-in-law was pushed from the balcony at exactly 7:10. At that exact second, I was sitting on a gurney with 3 medical witnesses. But someone was in my apartment. Someone was wearing my duplicate beige coat, faking my voice, and beating a 70-year-old woman with Alzheimer's to ensure the neighbors would testify against me. I pointed toward the elevator lobby of our building, and I think she's still inside. The apartment on the 10th floor was dark when the police team pushed the door open. The air inside was warm, smelling of roasted chicken and the sweet, vanilla-scented candles I had lit before leaving for my business trip. It was a home designed to look cozy, but tonight the silence in the hallway felt like a heavy, suffocating weight. Clear the rooms, Sergeant Miller ordered, his hand resting on his taser holster. The 2 officers fanned out, their heavy boots squeaking softly on the polished hardwood floors. Isaac stood near the entryway, his laptop bag still clutched in his hand, his eyes wide and vacant, as if he were staring at a grave that had been dug in his own living room. He kept his head down, his lips moving as he muttered to himself. She was supposed to be in the car, he whispered. The timeline. Higgins said she was in the ambulance. How did she? I didn't answer him. I walked straight to our master bedroom, with Sergeant Miller following closely behind. The room was immaculate. The bed was made, the beige linen sheets pulled tight. But on the floor near the wardrobe, there was a small, damp spot of water on the rug, and the smell of a cheap, metallic rose perfume, the one Kathy Wilbury always wore, was heavy in the air. The wardrobe, I said, pointing to the built-in white doors. Sergeant Miller stepped forward, his fingers hooking around the handle. He pulled it open with a sharp whoosh. A girl was huddled in the corner, wedged between my winter coats and a stack of storage boxes. It was Kathy. She was wearing my duplicate beige coat, the one she had bought last winter, because she said she loved my style. Her fingers were clawed into the fabric of the coat, her dark hair messy and wet with sweat, her face pale as paper as she looked up at the officer's flashlight. Kathy, I said, my voice flat, devoid of the shaking anger she had expected. The party is over. You can come out now. No, please. Kathy shrieked, her hands reaching out to grab the clothes rails, her voice losing all its sweet, fragile polish. Isaac, you said. She was going to jail. You said the police would have her in handcuffs by now. Why is she here? Ms. Wilbury, Sergeant Miller said, his hand grabbing her arm and pulling her out of the wardrobe with a firm, unyielding grip. You are under arrest for first-degree murder, conspiracy to commit fraud, and malicious false accusation. You have the right to remain silent. As the cuffs clicked shut around her wrists, the cardboard box of my winter clothes was knocked over. Inside lay a single red-stained leather belt, the one Isaac had used to beat his mother to make the neighbors believe there was an active domestic fight going on before they pushed her off the ledge. I looked at the belt, then at Isaac, who was standing in the doorway, his face completely devoid of any human warmth. You took her money, Isaac, I said, my voice dropping into a register that made the entire room go silent. You took her pension, you took her jewelry, and then you took her life. All for a $50,000 insurance payout and a clean break from our marriage. Amber, Isaac whispered, his knees buckling slightly as he sank onto the carpet. It wasn't my idea, Kathy. Kathy said your father's estate would go to me if you were convicted. She said. I don't care who said it, I said, turning my back to him as the officers led them both out into the rain. The next morning, the sun was pale and gray, struggle-ing through the heavy clouds of the city. I sat in the office of Arthur Vance, my lead attorney, a cup of hot chamomile tea in my hand. On the table between us lay the small, blue plastic memory card I had pulled from my dashcam right before the crash. The technical team verified the files, Jess, Arthur said, sliding a portable hard drive toward me. The dashcam's interior microphone is a high-sensitivity model. It doesn't just record the cabin. It records the area within a 10-foot radius of the vehicle when the engine is idling. He pressed play on his terminal. The audio file was clean, the digital noise reduction system of the office having filtered out the low rumble of the highway traffic. The first voice was Isaac's, low, gravelly, and carrying that flat, executive precision he used when he was talking to his business partners. She's almost at the intersection. I've already sent the text. Kathy, make sure the door is locked from the outside. If she tries to run back to the car, she won't be able to get in. And then another voice. It was Kathy's. It was clear, carrying that high, slightly breathless purr she used when she was trying to play the victim. The old hag won't stop crying, Isaac. She keeps asking for her tea. I've already put the beige coat on. The neighbors are on their balconies. I'm going to start the argument now. The sound of a heavy blow, A sharp, dull thud echoed through the speaker, followed by the sound of Maryanne's weak, trembling whimpers. Arthur slowly closed the folder, his sharp gray eyes locking onto my face. "This is first-degree murder, Jess," he said, his voice quiet. "The prosecutor has already upgraded the charges. With this audio and the hospital records, they're looking at a life sentence without the possibility of parole." "Thank you, Arthur," I said, my fingers closing around the cold plastic of my tea mug. "And the estate?" he asked. "The company shares? The apartment?" "We sell the apartment," I said, looking out the window at the gray river below. "I'll use the funds to establish a private foundation for late-stage Alzheimer's patients in Maryanne's name. I want her to have a clean, quiet stone in the cemetery, one with flowers." 3 years later, the coastal town of Mendocino was quiet in the winter. The air smelled of salt, pine needles, and the cold mist that rolled off the Pacific every morning. The only sound was the distant, rhythmic crash of the waves against the black cliffs of the harbor. I sat on the wooden deck of my small, gray-shingled cottage, a cup of hot chamomile tea in my hand. My forehead was completely healed, leaving only a faint, thin white scar near my hairline that was invisible under my bangs. Beside me on the table lay my drawing tablet, its screen displaying a clean, elegant landscape design for our new municipal park project. "Jess." I looked up. My colleague, a tall, quiet man with dark hair and a green backpack, named Marcus, was standing by the glass door, holding a fresh batch of warm cinnamon rolls. "The wind is picking up, Jess," Marcus smiled, sitting down beside me and pulling a wool blanket over our knees. "Are you cold?" I looked down at the design on my screen, then at the golden sunset over the ocean, and finally at his warm, genuine smile. "No," I said, leaning my head against his shoulder. "I'm very warm." Across the water, the first yellow lights of the harbor were starting to glow in the dark, but I didn't look at them. I closed my laptop, took a sip of my warm tea, and let the clean, cold wind off the water carry the last dry leaves of the past away into the endlessly beautiful horizon ahead.